In a quiet diner just outside Savannah, Georgia, a woman stirs her coffee absent-mindedly as the rain taps against the window. Across from her sits a man, calm, composed, not saying much. He listens more than he speaks. He doesn't interrupt her thoughts. He doesn't try to impress her. And yet, she can't stop thinking about him. Love, she realizes, doesn't come when a man tries hard to win her. It comes when she meets a man who doesn't need to. You see, most men think women fall for grand gestures, flowers, clever lines, perfectly timed texts. But the truth? Love doesn't begin when she feels safe. It begins when she feels something she can't explain. A pull, a mystery, a quiet strength. This video isn't about tricks or lines, it's about truth. Why women fall differently. Why silence sometimes says more than 1,000 apologies. Why a man standing still can make her whole world shift. And if you've ever wondered why some men haunt her long after the texts stop, you're about to find out. Stay until the end. Because once you understand this, you won't just attract love, you'll understand the kind she never forgets. Part 1. She falls for the man who doesn't need her. It happened in Nashville. A man named Cole walked into a room, said little, smiled even less. He wasn't cold, just still. You could feel that his life wasn't paused, waiting for someone to validate it. It was already full. Music, mornings at the gym, a dog named Scout, and a dream he chased quietly under the glow of streetlights. He met a woman one summer night at a rooftop bar. She was used to attention, men leaning in too fast, too eager, too hungry. But Cole, he listened. He didn't flatter. He didn't text paragraphs. He didn't ask for her time. He gave her space to offer it. And that unsettled her in the most beautiful way. You see, women don't fall for men who orbit them like satellites. They fall for men who live as suns, burning with their own fire, pulling her in not by pursuit, but by gravity. A man who doesn't need her, that's the man she starts to need. Not because he withholds, but because his presence isn't desperate, it's deliberate. Not because he ignores, but because his world moves with or without her in it. Most men are taught to prove they're worthy of love by overgiving. But women feel something deeper. They crave emotional weight. A man who holds himself like he holds a mountain inside, steady, silent, immovable. The truth is, when a man builds his life for himself first, his purpose, his boundaries, his passions, he becomes magnetic. Not loud, not flashy, but unforgettable. And it's not about being unavailable. It's about being centered. When she can sense that he's not chasing, she starts to follow. Not because he played a game, but because he played no game at all. She leans in, not because he needs her, but because something about him feels like peace, and she wants to be near that kind of peace. So if you've ever felt like caring less makes her come closer, maybe it's not less care. Maybe it's more wholeness. And that is what she truly falls for. Part 2. Emotional tension pulls her in. In a small town outside Denver, there was a man named Elijah. He worked with his hands, built furniture, one piece at a time. He wasn't flashy, didn't post daily selfies. He didn't overshare his heartbreaks or drown women in endless confessions. But people noticed when he walked in, not because he spoke, but because he didn't need to. He met a woman at the farmer's market. She smiled easily. He smiled less. She asked questions. He answered, but only enough to make her wonder. And it was that gap, that slight edge of mystery, that made her heartbeat do something unfamiliar. Emotional tension isn't chaos. It's not manipulation. It's the music between the notes, the silence between words. It's the space where curiosity lives. Most men rush to fill that space. They overshare to prove depth, over-validate to feel loved, overcompensate for their own uncertainty. But Elijah, he let the silence breathe. He didn't chase every text or try to define every moment. And in that restraint, she found something rare, energy that invited, not demanded. You see, love doesn't bloom in perfect comfort. It blooms in the tension between I know you and I want to know more. There's a psychology behind it. Intermittent reinforcement, the way the brain attaches deeper meaning to something unpredictable. But the soul doesn't speak in science. The soul just knows. Mystery feels like magic. Stoic men understand this. They don't spill their every emotion like an open faucet. They feel deeply, but express intentionally. They let a woman wonder, not to tease, but to teach her the rhythm of presence and patience. Because when she can't quite figure him out, when she doesn't know exactly where she stands, that's when she leans in. And that lean, that's where love begins. So if you've ever noticed she pulls closer when you stop explaining, it's not because you're cold. It's because emotional tension isn't confusion. It's chemistry held with care. And in that space between certainty and longing, she doesn't just fall. She remembers falling. Part 3. Mystery triggers obsession. In the Pacific Northwest, in a town where the fog rolls in before dawn, there was a man named Matthew. He didn't say much on first dates. When women asked about his past, he answered in pieces, like a novelist who only gave them the prologue. His silence wasn't cold. It was curated, chosen. He made people feel like they were reading a story that wasn't finished yet. And that's exactly why they kept turning the pages. Women don't obsess over what's obvious. They obsess over what's just out of reach. Not because it's cruel, but because it's compelling. You see, most men try to be understood too fast. They pour their hearts out in a single sitting. They confuse vulnerability with availability. And in doing so, they rob her of the discovery. But Matthew, he let his depth unfold like a mist on a lake, slow, steady, unknowable. And that mystery, it haunted her in the best way. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to remember what's incomplete. But to her, it wasn't a theory. It was a feeling. The way he looked at her without telling her what he was thinking. The way he shared stories with gaps, spaces her mind filled with wonder. Stoic men understand this too. They don't speak their philosophy. They live it. They reveal themselves like seasons, gradually, authentically. Not to impress, but to allow the connection to earn its way in. Mystery isn't about withholding. It's about self-respect. Because when a woman has to work a little to understand you, when she earns pieces of you, not all at once, you become more than a man. You become an experience, a puzzle, a novel she can't put down. So if you've ever felt her lean closer the moment you stopped over-explaining, if you've watched curiosity bloom in the silence between your sentences, then you already know mystery doesn't confuse her, doesn't. It consumes her. Part 4. Masculine calm breaks her walls. In Austin, Texas, where the summers stretch long and the cicadas sing late into the evening, there was a woman named Claire who had stopped trusting men years ago. She'd heard all the right words. I'll never leave. You're safe with me. You can tell me anything. But when her storms came, her tears, her silence, her spirals, those men vanished. Or worse, they panicked and tried to fix her like she was a broken chair leg. Then she met Noah. He didn't talk much when she cried. He didn't reach for platitudes or rush to make her smile. He sat with her in it, in the hard parts, the messy parts, the places she thought made her unlovable, and he never flinched. You see, women don't open up because you say the right thing. They open because your energy says you can unravel here, and I'll still stay. Masculine calm is not a performance. It's not about being stoic-faced or emotionally numb. It's about presence. About being the lighthouse when her sea gets rough. Most men mirror her chaos. She gets emotional, they get defensive. She pulls back, they chase harder. She questions, they crumble. But the rare man, the one who breathes deeply, listens fully, stays still without retreating or reacting, that man becomes her harbor. In Stoic philosophy, it's called containment. Marcus Aurelius once said, If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Noah lived that. He didn't take her moods personally. He didn't let her fear make him small. He stood quietly, like a tree that had weathered enough storms to know, this one will pass too. And in that stillness, Claire did something she hadn't done in years. She let someone see her. Not the version she polished, not the version she filtered, but the real one. The one that cries without reason and hopes without logic. So if you've ever watched a woman soften, not because you said something perfect, but because you didn't run, then you understand. It's not charm that breaks her walls. It's the man who can hold her storm without losing his ground. Part 5. She bonds through earned intimacy. In a quiet corner of Vermont, under a maple tree that turned gold every October, a man named Lucas sat on a park bench, sipping his coffee. He had been seeing someone new, a woman named Natalie. She was kind, bright, the kind of woman who filled silences with stories and questions and warm laughter. But Lucas didn't spill his past like a glass knocked over. He gave her a little, then waited. Let her sit with it. Let her earn the next page. He didn't do it out of fear. He did it out of value. You see, women don't bond deeply through how quickly you open up. They bond through the feeling that they've earned something sacred. And when a man gives his soul away too fast, his pain, his trauma, his entire story, it doesn't always feel like closeness. Sometimes it feels like emotional clutter. We live in a world addicted to oversharing. People post their hearts online like yard sale items. Cheap, fast, disposable. But real intimacy, that's built slowly, privately. Like carving initials into a tree you plan to visit every fall. Natalie once told Lucas, "I feel like you're giving me pieces, not all at once, but just enough to know you trust me." And that, right there, was the bond. Because when a woman feels like she's earned her place in your world, when she's crossed thresholds through patience, respect, and presence, that's when she stays. Not because you gave her everything, but because you gave her something rare. Psychologists call it investment bias. We value what we work for. Stoics call it temperance, the discipline of not overgiving, not oversharing, not overexposing what is still becoming. Lucas wasn't withholding. He was building something layer by layer. And in each pause, each silence, each moment of stillness, Natalie felt something bloom. Not lust, but loyalty. So if you've ever watched a woman lean in as you revealed your depth in slow, careful measure, then you know a woman doesn't stay because you handed her everything. She stays because she earned a key to a door not everyone gets to open. Part 6. Confidence without validation makes her chase. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, beneath skies the color of burnished copper, there was a man named Julian. He had a quiet way of walking into a room, like he didn't need to be seen to take up space. Women noticed him not because he tried, but because he didn't. He wasn't rude. He smiled, he nodded, but he never performed. He once dated a woman who was used to being adored. Men chased her like she was the last star in the sky. Compliments, flowers, good mornings, good nights, and she always lost interest. But with Julian, she kept leaning in, because he didn't hand her validation on a silver platter. He gave her respect, yes, but he didn't need her approval to feel like he mattered. You see, real confidence is not loud. It doesn't announce itself in every room. It just is. Women are used to men crumbling in the face of beauty. They fall into performance mode, jokes, praise, endless affirmations. They try to earn their place by over-giving, overcompensating, overstaying. But the man who doesn't need to be chosen? That's the man she starts choosing. Not because he's aloof, but because his energy doesn't beg, it invites. Not because he's cold, but because he holds himself with the kind of quiet certainty that can't be faked. Confidence without validation is rooted in self-command. The kind of strength Stoics taught centuries ago, to stand tall even when unseen, to know your worth even when no one claps. Marcus Aurelius once said, "It is in your power to retire into yourself whenever you choose." Julian lived that. He didn't text to soothe his ego. He didn't flatter to fish for love. He simply existed, like the desert, vast, whole, unhurried. And in that stillness, the woman found herself wondering, why isn't he chasing me? Why do I want him to? That was the shift. So if you've ever watched a woman lean closer the moment you stopped over-validating, if you've ever felt her energy rise when yours no longer depended on hers, then you've seen the truth. You don't need to shine for her to see you. You only need to stop dimming your light to prove it's there. Part 7. Presence over performance wins. In Asheville, North Carolina, where the mountains hug the morning mist and coffee shops play old records on slow days, there was a man named Theo. He wasn't the funniest guy in the room, didn't dominate conversation, didn't recite quotes or tell wild stories to win attention. But when he was with you, he was with you. His phone stayed in his pocket. His eyes didn't drift to the clock. He didn't rush to fill every silence. And that made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. You see, most men perform, not because they're shallow, but because they're afraid silence means they're not enough. So they joke, impress, overtalk. They try to keep her attention like someone trying to hold water in their hands. But women don't fall in love with the man who entertains them most. They fall for the one whose presence stills the noise. Presence isn't passive. It's the most powerful kind of engagement, where attention becomes sacred, where the moment slows down, where she doesn't feel like she's on trial, but like she's home. Psychologists say presence reduces anxiety. But women don't think in textbooks. They just feel it. They feel when your mind is elsewhere. They feel when your smile is performative. And they feel when your attention lands on them like sunlight, soft, real, and unhurried. Theo didn't try to impress her. He just showed up fully. And in doing so, he gave her something more rare than charm, peace. Seneca once wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future." That's what presence is, not trying to win the next moment, but honoring the one you're already in. So if you've ever stopped performing and simply been and watched her relax, soften, open, then you already know. A woman remembers the man who made her laugh, but she aches for the one who made her feel safe to exhale. Part 8. Silence is more powerful than persuasion. In a lakeside town in Minnesota, there was a man named Ethan. He had loved before, loved with the kind of intensity that makes you write long messages at 2 a.m. just to be understood. He had begged once, explained too much once, tried to hold someone in his life with nothing but desperate words, and it had left him empty. But this time was different. She started pulling away, slowly, like a tide retreating. The messages became shorter. The warmth in her voice faded, and Ethan stayed silent. He didn't chase, didn't ask for answers she wasn't ready to give, didn't argue his worth. He simply paused, not from pride, but from peace. You see, silence isn't passive. It's presence without pressure. It's restraint without resentment. Most men panic when a woman grows distant. They flood her with texts, voice notes, apologies, logic. But persuasion isn't power. Composure is. Because when you fill the space between you with noise, she can't feel your value. But when you hold that space with silence, steady, strong, unfazed, she begins to hear the echo of her own heart. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." But sometimes the best answer to doubt is the same. Ethan knew that if she truly valued him, she would return. Not because he convinced her, but because the quiet revealed something louder than words. He didn't need to beg to be chosen. And she did return, not with an apology, but with a whisper, "I didn't expect your silence to say so much." Because in that stillness, she felt something real. So if you've ever watched someone drift and chose silence instead of chasing, and they came back not because you pulled them, but because they realized they missed a man who wouldn't chase what wasn't real, then you know. The man who can walk away quietly is the one she'll never forget. Not because he disappeared, but because he left a space no noise could ever fill. Part 9. Stone Standards Trigger Desire. In downtown Chicago, in a loft above an old bookstore, there was a man named Gabriel. He was the kind of man who didn't speak unless he had something to say. Not because he was cold, but because his words cost something. So did his time. So did his love. He once dated a woman who was magnetic, brilliant, beautiful, unpredictable. The kind of woman who was used to bending the rules, watching men adjust themselves around her whims like soft clay. But Gabriel didn't move. When she cancelled plans last minute without a word, he didn't argue. He just didn't reschedule. When she flirted with someone else in front of him to provoke a reaction, he didn't fight. He simply left early and never explained. And that was what stayed with her. You see, women don't obsess over the men who bend. They obsess over the men who don't break. Because standards aren't about ego. They're about self-respect. They whisper, "This is who I am, and what I allow." Most men say they have standards until beauty walks in, until attention is dangled like a prize, until they fear losing more than they value standing tall. But Gabriel, he never feared the silence that followed when he stood firm, because he knew if you have to compromise your soul to keep someone, you never really had them. Epictetus wrote, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." That was Gabriel's creed. He didn't punish. He didn't demand. He simply lived by the boundaries he'd already decided mattered. And something incredible happened. The woman who thought she could play him found herself replaying him. Because women may test a man's limits, but what they truly crave is a man who has them. Soft voice, steady eyes, unshakable core. So if you've ever looked at someone you cared for and said, quietly but clearly, "That doesn't work for me," and walked away with your dignity intact, then you already know desire doesn't grow from giving her everything. It grows when she realizes not everyone gets access to you. Part 10. She falls hardest for the man who can walk away. In Monterey, California, where the cliffs meet the sea like a long unfinished sigh, a woman named Elise once sat across from a man named Carter at a quiet cafe. She was used to being chased, used to men folding the second she pulled away, used to watching them bargain their dignity for just one more chance. But Carter didn't do that. One day she tested his boundaries. She accused, she withdrew, she waited for him to rush in, to prove, to plead. Instead, he took a slow breath, looked her in the eye, and said softly, "If this doesn't feel right for you, you don't have to stay, and neither do I." Then he left, not angry, not dramatic, just whole. You see, most men confuse love with attachment. They believe staying no matter how they're treated is strength. But women don't fall hardest for the man who stays at any cost. They fall for the man who could leave, but chooses not to, as long as she honors his peace. Because that man is rare. His presence never feels guaranteed. His love is not a bargain. His time is not a reward for misbehavior. He's not trying to be unforgettable. He just is. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." A man who can walk away doesn't crave approval. He doesn't fear endings. He trusts his value enough to say, "If you cannot meet me here, I'll meet myself elsewhere." And that is what makes her fall the hardest. Not the words, not the charm, but the freedom. Because deep down she knows, if he can walk away from her, he'll never abandon himself. So, if you've ever stood at the edge of a fading love and chose your dignity over desperation, If you've ever let go, not to punish, but to protect your own soul, then you understand. The deepest kind of love begins when a man stops fearing loss. Epilogue. She loves differently. When you love yourself first. Somewhere in America tonight, maybe it's a porch in Georgia, maybe it's a rooftop in Seattle, a woman is lying awake, thinking not about the man who texted too much, but the one who made her feel something she couldn't explain. Not because he tried harder, but because he stood still while the rest of the world begged to be noticed. She remembers how he didn't chase, how he didn't perform, how he never tried to earn her, because he already lived as though he was enough. And that was the moment she truly began to love him. You see, love, real love, doesn't grow where you overextend, overgive, or overexplain. It grows in the spaces where you choose yourself first, where your silence holds more gravity than persuasion, where your presence makes her feel safe, not because you promised to stay, but because your calm said, even if you leave, I'll still be whole. This isn't about playing games. This is about playing real. And when you do, when you lead with strength instead of desperation, when you let her earn you, reveal you, experience you, then love doesn't just arrive, it lingers. So if you've watched this far, you're not like most men. You're the kind of man who no longer begs for closeness, because you've built something closer with yourself. And that's what she feels. That's what she respects. That's what she remembers long after the conversations end. Because the man who can walk away is the man she quietly hopes will stay. And if this story stirred something in you, don't just carry it, live it. Because there's a kind of love waiting for you, but only when you finally stop chasing the kind that cost you your soul.